Have you ever wanted the incredible performance of a Mac Pro, but without that incredible price tag? Well, good, because today we're gonna show you step by step how to build our official Mac Pro killer PC. And not only is it gonna be a third of the price of our Mac Pro, but it's also gonna be faster pretty much in every single way. We have a faster CPU, a faster graphics card, a faster SSD, and in general, this thing is just gonna be crazy. Now, as always, we have links in the video description to all of the parts that you guys see here, and I also included some alternatives just in case it is sold out, or if the prices go up, stuff like that. And for a few of these parts, I actually use them just because I had them, not because I would choose them, so then I would throw in some alternatives for you guys to check out. Let's take a quick look at the parts before we get started. Let's start off with the case, and for this one, I knew I needed something that is very high quality, so we have the Be Quiet Dark Base Pro 900. It's very nice as far as the building, the convenience features. The build quality is great with brushed aluminum, and then we have stainless. And one very important thing is the fact that it is quiet. It's designed to be quiet, and in order for it to be an official Mac Pro killer, it has to have that. Now, moving forward, we have the heart of this build, and this is the new Threadripper 3970X. It is an incredible CPU, 32 cores, high frequencies, and high per core efficiency, which is something the last generation did not have. So this is definitely going to be able to compete. I'm very looking forward to that. Now, that chip is going inside of this Aorus motherboard. It is an extreme edition, and this is a high-end motherboard that offers a lot of features, not only PCI Express 4, but also has dual 10 gigabit Ethernet, just like the Mac Pro, a lot of slots for add-in cards, multiple graphics cards, and of course, it just has wireless built in, and all the good features that you want. And then plugging into this, we have the Aorus M.2 SSD. I got the 1 terabyte option. They have a larger one as well. But what's important is this is a PCI Express 4.0 SSD. So it has twice the bandwidth connecting to the Threadripper, and the speeds here are going to be incredible, and they're going to smoke the Mac Pros, and that's something that the Mac Pro cannot offer. It's stuck with PCI Express 3.0. Now, as far as RAM, I have 8 sticks right here. This is HyperX from Kingston, their Predator RAM, really fast DDR4, and this totals 64 gigabytes. Now, if you want more than that, you can get larger capacities, and the bang for the buck is pretty good there as well. I just had these sticks on hand. Personally, I might want to double that if you want something that is incredible with lots of RAM available. And right next to it over here, I have a Gigabyte add-in card, and this is very important. It is Thunderbolt 3, so in order to compare to the Mac Pro, we have to have that. And not only could this output Thunderbolt 3, but it could actually accept an input from our graphics card, 2 inputs actually, so that it can send out a 6K signal through Thunderbolt 3 and power our Pro Display XDR monitor, because, you know, once again, to compete, we want that capability, and we're going to be making it happen with this add-in card. So since I mentioned the graphics card, let's move over. Of course, we need something that can take on that Vega 2 in terms of performance, and this is the 2080 Ti. It is incredibly powerful, basically the best bang for the buck graphics card right now if you want performance. It does not have as much video memory, but for almost most use cases, you do not need more than what this graphics card offers. So this is going to be incredibly powerful. Next to that, we have our power supply. This is a 750 watt from Cooler Master, and this thing, I would say maybe get a little bit of higher wattage, especially if you want to overclock and use dual graphics cards, but I have this on hand, and for our build, it's going to be just fine, but I will have an alternative linked down in the description. And then to cool this massive amount of power from the Threadripper, we have an Enermax triple radiator. Now, this thing I already used in a previous Threadripper build. One way it stands out is that it can completely cover the CPU, which most coolers do not do that. And what that means, it's going to give us really good performance. Now, some of the older units had issues with leaking. All of the newer ones from the last year or so have been updated, but just make sure if you're buying one that you buy a new one. And if you don't want to take any chances, I'll link an alternative down in the video description. Whoa, what do we have here? This is something that I was not expecting. It was not listed for in the motherboard, but it was included. This is a $150 PCI Express 4.0 add-in card that it can accept 4 4 M.2 PCI Express 4 SSDs and can RAID them together for a total of over 15,000 megabytes per second speeds. Absolutely insane. And this card is actually sold out everywhere, on Amazon, on Newegg, on eBay. So that is really cool that if you buy this motherboard, you can make use of this. Let's start out by taking off one side of the M.2 covers to install our M.2 SSD. The screw that you need is already there, so take it off. Now the M.2 covers actually have a thermal pad installed so it can cool down your M.2, but the one I bought, which is also from Gigabyte or Aorus, has this massive heatsink already there. So if you try to install it and then put the cover back on, it will not fit. So your choices are: 1, take all of this apart, or 2, just leave that cover off and let the built-in heatsink do its work, and that's what I'm gonna choose. Installing it is simply just line up the little cutout there, gently push it in, and then we're gonna go ahead and put that little screw back in. Now let's go ahead and install our Threadripper CPU. Inside of the box you have this little tool that is basically kind of like a torque wrench. It's going to put the proper amount of torque when you're going to install and screw down the CPU socket. And then you do not want to take the frame off of the CPU. This is going to make it easy to install, and it's going to help to not bend any pins on the motherboard, which is very important. I'm going to set it down very carefully. And right here on the socket we have a little 3, a 2, and a 1. And it's going to signify how to open and close it. So all the instructions are here. We're going to start with the 3rd, the 2nd, and the 1st to open this up. We have a plastic socket cover that is here to protect the pins. And I'm going to push down and release this little guide and then pull this out. So this is shaped just like our CPU frame. Grab our Threadripper CPU. Be very gentle. Take your time. We're going to slide that in. There we go. And it locks in, so you'll feel a little bit of pressure there. I'm gonna push down once again. And now we're gonna close this and then go ahead and screw in the opposite order. So now we're gonna start with 1 and then do 2 and 3. And then when you're tightening this down, you wanna keep going until you hear this little click, which means there's enough pressure, and that's why you want this special tool. Now I'm gonna move this aside, and we are gonna start out with the case. I really like these side panels when you just have these outside screws. I think it makes it easier, and then it looks nice. We want to be careful because this is real glass. I have to take a second and show off a few things about this case that is incredible. As you guys can see, we have a lot of room here, but we can actually install these floating cages instead of these little covers here. And this allows us to have 5 hard drives that are just going to float like this. Or you can have actually 10 SSDs because they can be mounted as well. Whereas the Mac Pro doesn't have any slots for any of that. You can buy a separate kit that holds 2. And then we have other slots in the back. So there are a ton of different add-in accessories that you can customize this with. Let me flip this around. And the crazy thing about this case is it's completely configurable. So this motherboard tray comes completely out. The whole back can come out. You can adjust height. You can even do a reverse build on the other side. And by taking all of this out, it makes it easier to build in. Now, I'm not going to be doing that today because for those of you guys that might choose a different case, you guys are not going to have that option. But just these few screws, you can take out the motherboard plate or the whole thing and assemble it outside and then put it back in, which is going to be fantastic. We also have an 8-fan controller with 2 separate channels, and there's so much extra things like I/O on the front, different things you can customize with this case that I cannot even cover, but it is amazing. We're going to start off by installing the power supply. Now this case has this top shroud that hides everything, hides your wires, which is awesome. Let's flip this around. We have 2 more screws that are hidden, and now we can remove this whole cover. And now I'm gonna remove these 2 screws, and then that will allow us to slide out the hard drive little cage. And that is an extra step that you usually don't have to do if you're installing from the back, but it does give us a lot more flexibility if you want to move things around in this case. And now let's put this little cage on our power supply, and there's going to be 4 screws that are included with your power supply that we're going to install here. Now I already have some cables plugged into my power supply. Some of these are fully modular, means all the cables are separate and you get to choose exactly what you need. Some are half. So I like that I don't have to have a bunch of cables here. I'm gonna go ahead and feed all these cables through the little section in the back here. And before I put it down, we need to go ahead and plug in the power cable into this power supply. So the case comes with its own separate switch and power cable here, and we want to make sure that our power supply is set to on. That's because as soon as it's in here, you're not going to have access to it. You're only going to have access to the switch in the back. We're going to line it up to the same screws that the case came out of, and then slide it forward. It's locked in. Then replace the 2 screws. Now we're going to install our motherboard. Once again, you can take that tray off. We're not going to do so. And one great thing about this nice motherboard is that it has the I/O plate on. If you have a cheaper one, you're going to have to first put it into the case. But this is all one unit. And typically you might have to add extra standoffs to fit your motherboard, but this case is all set up. It's ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and insert it. And then the middle one actually will kind of hang off of it. And that'll help you kind of be a guide to you. So you could do this laying down, it's easier. I'm gonna do it this way just to show you guys a better camera angle. So we're gonna set it right here, get it close to those little standoffs, and then carefully, we're gonna slide it back so that our I/O plate matches up perfectly. If it's properly in place, the center little peg, you can push it in and they'll actually support the motherboard. And in our accessories box, we're gonna have the screws for the motherboard. They're the ones with the bigger threads here. And we're going to screw those down in 5 spots, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it really helps to have a magnetic screwdriver for this. You want to make sure not to force it down. As soon as it stops, that is good enough. And if it's not screwing in, go ahead and unscrew it and make sure that your motherboard is lined up properly. Now I'm going to go ahead and take off this top cover. There are little clips that you just push down with your thumbs up over here, and a little bit further down to release it. Push down and then you can remove the cover. There we go. I'm going to take my motherboard power cables and then feed them through. Since our motherboard is so huge, it's actually covering a part of this cutout here. So my fat 24 pin won't fit through unless I want to remove the motherboard slightly and get it through first. So another option is to take off one of these little covers, which you might be off already if you have a hard drive cage. And we're going to route it through here. And then once again, this will only go in one way, and you want to make sure you push it all the way until you see this part lock in. And now it's time to install our massive liquid cooling system. So I went ahead and I placed this up here and kind of got a reference point of where it's going to attach. And unfortunately, because this thing is so massive and our motherboard also has this really large heatsink right here at the top, it just barely doesn't clear to be able to attach it. If we had a 2-fan radiator, it could be moved forward a little bit and worked, or we can attach it in the front, but we're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and lower the motherboard tray just a little bit, and it's nice that this case actually has that capability, and then we're going to have enough room to attach everything. And now that we fixed that, we can finally install our water cooling system. As you guys see, I already have the fans on here. If you guys get it out of the box, you're going to have to screw these in, and this is where it helps to have a second set of hands to hold that up for you, or you can lay the case down and just kind of hold it in place, get a few screws aligned, and then finish it up. Our fan cable is going to connect to the gray one, and then the pump is going to connect a little bit later to the one next to it. If you're installing this for the first time, you're going to have a full tube of thermal paste, and I would do a nice line down the center, and then when we apply even pressure, it's going to squish out. You don't want to overdo it. My first time I used probably about 3/4 of this, and it's still on there. I'm going to take the little remaining bit and just apply it here at the center. For this part, it's best to lay the case down, and we're going to align these screws with right where it needs to go on the socket. And then when you're screwing down the water block, you don't want to just get one and screw it all the way down. We want to start off with one of them and then move to another one just so they all attach. Once you're done, you can attach your water block's power connector right next to the other CPU fan connection. It's labeled CPU optional. And now let's go ahead and install our RAM. We have the slots right over here, 4 on each side, and we have these little locks just at the bottom, so you want to go ahead and open them up. And I have 8 sticks of RAM, and if you have 4 or 2, you want to check the manual of the motherboard. It'll tell you exactly which slots to use for your different configurations. But on these RAM sticks, we actually have a little notch, and that's how you know where to place them in. There's a notch on the motherboard, and they'll only go in one way. So once it's open, you want to align your RAM stick, and then if it's not going in, that means it's the wrong way. So we're going to flip this and then align it again. And it does take some effort. So I'm going to push on one side, push on the other, and then the lock will actually automatically engage. So all of the RAM slots on this side are going to face one direction, and then the ones on the other side are going to face the other direction. Now before we install our Thunderbolt card or the graphics card, I want to deal with some of these cables. Now we lower the motherboard over here and it makes it a little bit more difficult to access this bottom panel. Maybe it would have been good to connect those first. Of course we can remove this, slide it out to remove these two screws and have full access, but I'll just show you exactly where we're going to plug in. Down here we're going to have two different connections, our front audio and then our Thunderbolt 3 card connector. Next, we're going to connect our front USB-A ports and our USB-C port. Our USB 3 connections are right over here. Okay. And our USB Type-C connector is right up here. And now we're going to connect our fan controller that has a bunch of fans plugged into it to the motherboard. We're going to go through the top here, and it's going to connect right in this fan section, and it only goes in one way. And now we're going to connect the rest of the front panel connections here. With this motherboard, it makes it really easy because it comes with this G connector, meaning that we can connect everything externally, and then we're going to plug it into here and then connect the other side to the motherboard. It's going to make it much more simple. Just slide each connector into place and it'll lock in. And if you don't know which one's positive, this little arrow signifies the positive. So once it's all plugged in, you can go ahead and attach it to this little adapter. We're going to pass it through and it's going to attach right here. Now for our fan controller, we have two of these SATA connections for power, so I am going to have to add another cable to my power supply. That way I can connect this, and I'm going to go ahead and plug these in. They only go one way, so you don't need to force them. And we'll plug the other end into our modular power supply. And then if you want to make use of the included LED strips, we're going to tape those down wherever you want them and then run the cables to the back, and that is going to connect to our fan controller in the RGB sections. And now it's time to add in our Titan Ridge Thunderbolt card and our graphics card. For that, I'm going to have to remove 4 covers back here, 4 of the slot covers. We're going to skip the top one, remove the next 3 because our 2080 Ti has a massive heatsink that takes up 3 slots, and we're going to skip one and then remove one more at the bottom for the add-in card. I'm going to start off with the Thunderbolt 3 card, align the pins here, press in, and we'll go ahead and screw this one in. I'll start out by connecting our Thunderbolt connector here. We'll go ahead and connect our USB 2 connection here. We're going to connect it to the USB adapter and splitter that comes inside the motherboard box. And then we're going to pass this through to the other side there. And that's going to connect right there. And now we're going to connect power to the Thunderbolt. This is the same connector as a graphics card, but you only need 2 6-pins, so we don't need the little additional ones. And now it's time to put in our crazy 2080 Ti that has a huge heatsink here. So we're going to align it once again to the slots, make sure the lock is open, and push down evenly. And now we can go ahead and screw in the 3 screws. And for our last power connector, we have for the graphics card here. And this one, of course, needs all 8 pins from each set, so a total of 16. Now before we put the power supply shroud on and all the covers and the top and all of that, it's always good to plug it in first, make sure that it boots up, because if you have one cable that's not connecting or something like that, you're going to have to take it all apart. So I plugged it in right there. And I have a little HDMI monitor for my camera that I'm going to use, so I don't have to get my whole monitor out here. And there we have it. We have LED lights, we have fans, and then I'll look on my little monitor here to see if we get a signal with the BIOS popping up here. And there we have it, the fan spun down, the BIOS is showing up. So let's go ahead and put all the covers back on. So I have my 4K monitor right here. I'm not yet going to test out the 6K XDR monitor. That's going to be after we get Windows installed, but I do want to show you guys how we make that connection from the graphics card to the Thunderbolt 3 card and then out to Thunderbolt to the display. So we have 2 of these cables that are included in the box. We're going to connect the mini display ports to the input of the Thunderbolt 3 card, and then on the other end, the full-size display ports are going to connect to our graphics card. Now that might seem weird to have to do that, but that's what we need to do to get a crazy enough signal to do 6K with 10-bit HDR. But like I said, I'm not gonna test this just yet. We are gonna connect our regular 4K display. All right guys, here we are in the BIOS. We are showing our 32-core 3970 AMD CPU. It's idling at 38 Celsius, which is great. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna grab my Windows 10 USB stick, and this can be created for free from Microsoft's website. I'm gonna insert it and we're gonna restart to start up our setup. And we'll leave a link in the video description where you can go and create one of these for yourselves. So when we start the system up, as soon as you see the BIOS screen, we wanna just keep hitting F12. That's gonna get us our boot menu. Now I just had one issue show up when I was trying to load in my USB Windows drive. As soon as I would put the USB stick inside of the computer and then try to boot, it would really not turn on. And on the motherboard, I would have an OD as far as the error code. So what I ended up doing is unplugging that USB drive, and then as soon as I see the Aorus logo, that's when I would plug it in and then hit F12 so that this boot menu comes up, and that worked perfectly. So now we see our gigabyte, a terabyte of ultra-fast NVMe SSD, and then the flash drive over here. So I'm gonna select that partition, and here we go. We have our Windows set up. I'm gonna hit install now. If you don't have a product key, just click I don't have a product key, and it'll still let you install Windows. I'm gonna go with the home version because that's what I do have a product key saved for, but you could do the Pro if you have that. We wanna select the custom option because we're doing a new installation. And then here we have our 1 terabyte SSD. It's actually showing up as 931. I guess there's a lot of space that's saved just in case. So I'm gonna click on that, hit new, and then hit apply to keep the default size. And then it's gonna create a couple different partitions that Windows needs. There we go. And then we're just gonna hit next. And there we have it, Windows is installing. So there we have it, we are all done with our Threadripper step-by-step build, the system that's gonna be taking on my personal Mac Pro. Make sure you guys have notifications enabled if you guys wanna check out that video. And you can go in your BIOS, you can change your memory profile to set it to the proper speed of the RAM that you bought. And then go on from there installing your programs, doing Windows Update, all of that good stuff, and using it just like any normal PC. Let us know if you have any questions down in the comment section below. Once again, we have links to all of the parts that we personally use, along with some alternatives and some suggestions for a few of the parts that I probably would do something different with, because I did own a few of these parts here. So you guys can go and check those out. Click that little circle above to subscribe and check out a couple other great videos right over there, one of which may already be the Mac Pro comparison if that is out. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.